My first experience of Scottish Youth Theatre was the Summer Festival at Stirling in 1981. And I'd probably done a workshop before that actually, because I've been trying to remember just my first encounter, and I think it might have been a weekend workshop along at the Glasgow Arts Centre. And the nice thing about being a student in 1981 was that there was only 50 of us. It was quite a small group. And the age range was from, I think it might have been 16 to 21. And the following year, when I went back in 82, which was through in Edinburgh, the age range had changed. It had gone down from 13 to 21. And I was a bit of an older SYT member. I was about 18, 19 when I first started. So I did feel actually the second year that I'd moved on. I'd been out working for that while. And so, but it was through in Stirling and it was residential. And that was actually probably quite important. It meant that we could all be on campus. But it was really nice. I had been working in the business in a kind of unusual way where I was actually working with theatre every day. So I was leading SYT for something kind of different. An opportunity to meet probably new people who worked in the business already, professionals. And I suppose that was what was quite important about it, that not only was I getting a chance to meet people from all over Scotland, but that I was working with people who were doing this day in, day out, and theatre practitioners and what they had to bring. So I suppose because I was that bit older, I was taking it for a different, it wasn't just a chance to leave home for 5 weeks. But it was, it was actually the start of quite a nice association with the Prince's Trust, for instance, who had given me money to go to SYT in the first residential year, because it was expensive, and I was born and brought up in East Kilbride and we didn't have a lot of money. So it was a thought to have to try and find some kind of funding, and at that time the Prince's Trust gave me money, and that I have continued my association with them because they've realised they're almost sort of the same age as SYT, and I think they realised the importance of it at that time. And so so the first year was Lord of Creation. No, it was Sun Circle by Donald Campbell, and it was a kind of druid, Pictish type of theatre piece with music, and I played Granny Beg. So very sadly, I'm now playing a proper grandmother. At that time, at least I was young enough to pretend to be a grandmother, but now I'm actually getting grandmother roles, which is very depressing. But Granny Beg was a great character. I still have a great photograph of this kind of, it was my real hair at the time, but kind of mashed in grey, and it was a sort of this haystack of hair. And lots of people came through that year in particular. Therese Bradley, who's still in the business, and George Anton, and so there was a lot of, and I bumped into somebody in Australia, a chap called Mark Chiappi, who the following year, 1982, and he still works in the business out in Sydney. So I suppose you realise actually that you've met people at that point in your life and you'll continue to be friends with them. And I suppose one of the most important things that's really happened in my life and in my career is the fact that it gave me my first professional job. It was the Young Playwrights Festival. And it then afforded me the opportunity to actually, when I got my equity card, and get a wage from it. And so it was a special place in my heart for SYT. It was a joint production with the Traverse. And I remember going to see, because Robin Peoples, who was at one point the director of SYT, I had worked with him in a former place called the Glasgow Arts Centre, which had a company called The Company. And I had worked with him, and so he gave me my first job. And I remember that being really, really important. I earned £111, and it was like as if I'd won the lottery. And it was working with young playwrights who would go into schools and community centres and various arts organisations and actually perform young people's writing. So, I think that's where it has sort of extended the fact that it's encouraged people to write and direct, and, so people who have come through the business have come through it for all different reasons. But I think also what's really important is if you don't want it to be your career, that's great, because I think it just then infuses you with a confidence that you can go into any workplace, that you can go into any situation you can actually converse. And as far as I'm concerned, that's one of the most important things for young people. I kind of tell my girls are now older, but you know, the most important thing is to be able to walk into a room and smile and say hello. And if that's what SYT does, then that is more vital than any of us can ever imagine. I was always going to be an actor. I think I was fortunate enough to have a drama teacher at school, and I did theatre studies within school. I mean, it wasn't standard grade and it wasn't higher at that point. It was just basically 2 periods of art, 2 periods of music and 2 periods of drama. And that was because you couldn't do maths. And as I say, it was quite an unusual thing to have a drama teacher when I first started in high school. That was unusual. And she was told at the time that she wasn't allowed to encourage young people to be actors, that they had to be teachers. If they were going to go anywhere near the business, there was to be a teacher. And so I applied to drama school at that point to be a teacher and failed miserably 3 times. But the thing about applying for drama school is they said go away and get more experience. So as far as I was concerned, SYT was ticking that important box. Go away and get more experience. That's great. Went away and got more experience, came back the following year. No, go away and get more experience. I went to SYT the following year. So, you know, I was very clear about my career path at that point. I was committed to it. SYT was important to kind of tick all those boxes. As I thought at the time, that was what it was important for, but in actual fact it was important for lots of reasons. And then to come back in the 90s and to be on the board at a point where the company was going through really difficult times. It was based up at the old Athenaeum, and that was a great space at one point, but it wasn't fit for purpose for SYT's needs. And you know, we were very aware of the fact that it didn't have the facilities that we needed to encourage, you know, across the board about people to come into the space and to be able to use the lift, and it didn't have those facilities. And we went through a kind of legal battle at that point, which became tedious in its extreme. And so I was kind of comforted by the fact that when I returned as a patron in the year 2000, the company had moved on and to a building that was much more, you know, helpful to what it needed it to be. But I think what's important, and I think it's the same with the National Theatre of Scotland, it's about being for Scotland. And the fact that it can go out with this building and it can encourage people from all over to come to SYT. It would be lovely, as it is, to have this opportunity to wish SYT a happy 40th birthday. I was only 7 when I went to SYT in the early days, sort of. You know, so it's wonderful that they've reached this important part in its life. And I know it will continue to go from strength to strength, I know that.